All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy from the road. Liz Rhoades, also from the road, I think. Lou Bryson, who I think
Not
is at
on the road.
home. Nothing interesting there. Me neither. But this week we have special guest Heather Greene of Milam and Green, who I will let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a few minutes. Before we jump in, I'm Will Hookinga from Savvy.co. As always, just want to point out a couple of ways that you can interact with your hosts and their guests throughout the show today. So to your right, you'll see a little chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. It's always cool to see where folks are tuning in from around the world. If you have a question at any point during the show, there's a little button that says ask a question. Just press that, type your question in. I'll be keeping an eye out for those and relaying them over to your hosts here. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it really easy to do that. But with all that said, Marty, Liz, Lou, I will turn things over to you now.
Hey, thanks, Will. You're the bestest. Hi, everyone. I'm Martin Duffy, coming to you live from Louisville, Kentucky. That's why everything looks kind of like a Batman villain scene here. So I'm a former, 14 years as a former senior master of whiskey for Diageo, 18 glorious months as the Benedictine National Brand Ambassador.
Sticky months, I believe you said.
Thank you. How many? 18.
Sticky months.
It was city months. And then what else? 8 years as co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. And for the last 6.5 years, nearly 7, that makes it almost, as the sole brand representative for Glencairn Crystal. And it's all packed in bags, ready to head out on the road.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you go. Little lizard.
Thanks, Marty.
Do I need glasses?
I'm here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am also on the road. I'm at Far North Spirits, so almost to Canada. It's great to finally be able to move about the country. So yeah, thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have about just over a decade of experience across alcoholic beverage, including some work on beer, rum, vodka, but my particular favorite and expertise, of course, is whiskey. Absolutely. Spent most of my career at a small little company known as Diageo, but now I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And hey, want to learn a little bit more about what Spirit Safe Consulting is all about? That's great. If you just scroll down to about the host section, there's actually a little link to my website. So give it a click, check it out. Lou?
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. And I also encourage you to click on the link and check it out. My name is Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. Been doing that for a while. I also write about beer, but right now I'm plugging my latest book, Whiskey Masterclass, about
Come on,
flavor
Marty.
and aroma creation. What, you didn't take it on the road with you? What's the matter with
Wait a minute. I got it. It's holding up this chair.
It's good for that. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years, and I'm currently a senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast website. And today I'm drinking OH Ingram. This is rye whiskey. This is the barge whiskey you may have heard about. They aged this on a barge on the Mississippi. Really interesting. I'd kind of like to go see it. And I have to tell you, it's drinking really well. I just wish I knew how much of that was the barge. But it's awfully tasty. So, do you want to introduce, or am I running, or you tell me, Marty?
The show.
Okay, all right. Our guest today was an invite of mine. An old friend and colleague is Heather Greene. Heather and I came out with whiskey books right about the same time. and kind of like ran into each other at events. Oh God, for a couple of years after that, and next thing you know, Heather shows up running Milam and Greene in Blanco, Texas.
Texas.
And so here's the girl from New York suddenly driving a pickup truck and blending whiskey and actually doing the shit that we just write about. So very happy to have you. Got a lot of questions about that because I'm really curious how the hell to get out of this gig. Heather, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks. I'm excited to see you guys too, all of you. Lou, great to see you. I always enjoy hanging out with you and hearing your infectious laugh.
They actually have a cure for it now.
Greg Johnson actually chimed in, Lou. He has a copy of your book right next to him.
Thank you, Greg. Makes up for Marty. Heather, we always start this. We always start the show out by. We always start the show by asking the guests, essentially, tell us how you got to where you are. You don't have to go into grade school, but
yeah, no.
You know.
Yeah,
unless that's where you started, really.
Yeah,
unless that's where you started. That's true.
Interesting. Well, you don't really go to your high school guidance counselor now and say, "I'm going to be a whiskey expert." I probably could have early on in high school. I wasn't the easiest high school student to raise.
Do tell.
But I turned that into a career. So, but I would say not going all the way to the past and everything, but I was in Scotland. I lived in Scotland, in Edinburgh, Scotland, and that is really where I took what I thought of as kind of like a fun habit. Like I like nosing, I like tasting. I worked at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society as literally like, a bartender, and just fell in love. So for 2 years, I really immersed myself in Scotch whiskey, and this was before this new resurgence of whiskey. This was, or maybe just around that time, like 2005, 6, 7, where people are just starting to really rediscover whiskey. And then
I gotta say, I remember thinking at that time that whiskey was in a resurgence, and
really,
well, I was just wrong. Oh man, you know, when you look at it now, good God, it was nothing. Yeah.
It was nothing.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoyed working there. And I thought there was something really wistful and beautiful about Scotch whiskey and the casks and being there. I was a professional musician. My husband was in grad school. It was just kind of one of those things. And then I remember this. I said, oh, that would be so cool. Like if I could just go back to the States and just talk whiskey all day, that would be the most amazing dream job. Seriously. And then my brother-in-law sent me an ad. He's like, I found this on Indeed or something, like, because I was being kind of flippant and silly about it. And it was for a brand ambassador in New York, which is exactly where I was moving for Glenfiddich, a Scotch brand. And so I applied there on the spot. So
wow. That's awesome.
I was back in New York, but before I had gone to Scotland, like I'd worked in a lot of bars and restaurants and things like that. So that's really where that passion started. And then from there, I mean, it's like there's a benefit to being, kind of amongst the first. I'm not going to say the first because there are people before me, obviously, but the new resurgence being there right before the wave just is like, now it's like, wow, it's like, it's insane, So I traveled around the world for 5 years with Glenfiddich. And then left and wanted to go back into music. Actually, I was like, that's it. I'm going back to music, and didn't want to travel so much. And then I got a book deal, and then that happened. And then I worked at the Flatiron Room and helped open that with Tommy, my good friend still. I don't know, and then it just snowballed, right? And then now here I am. So, that's how it is.
Oh, the last part just kind of went really fast.
I know.
I was with Tommy, this all happened.
Yeah. Okay. So then I wrote the book. I was like, I'll give it a pause, But Then I, from Glenfiddich, went to the Flatiron Room in Manhattan, and was there and wrote the book on whiskey.
Oh.
Kidding. Just kidding. Wrote a book on whiskey. And
Guest privileges.
Actually, I was just saying it was, I don't know if you remember this, Lou, but actually our books were released in the same week with Dave Brooms as well.
I thought it was in the same month. Was it really the same
It
week?
was like the same week or something. And it was just like,
yeah, it was damn close. I know.
Like,
We should
really?
have talked to our publishers about that.
Exactly. Well, they were all like, great minds. So wrote that. And then from there, really, as you know, a book, Lou will tell you this. It's not like you make a lot of money writing a book. You just don't. But you get work from writing a book, So then I was consulting and started consulting for many brands and just kind of like behind the scenes. I wasn't somebody who people just found me word of mouth, and I would fly all over and help brands with branding, marketing, some tastings. I did events. I did more writing. I did that for about 6 years, actually, 5 or 6 years. And I came to Texas, was one of the brands that I'd met through some old musician friends, actually. And I came down here and consulted and spent a good part of the summer down here working with this little brand down here that a woman named Marcia Milam had founded, hence the Milam. And it was called Ben Milam at the time, and worked with them and just fell in love. They had just hired Marlene Holmes. Now, Marlene Holmes was with Jim Beam for 27 years. She was a senior distiller there, just like an unbelievable person. And just tremendous personality. Well, she's quiet and humble, but you walk into a room, you just want to hear her stories and you want to just know what she has to say about whiskey. And I just thought she was amazing. And, other brands had asked me, would you like to jump or whatever? But there was just something, I just was like, this is cool. This is in the middle of this beautiful place. I've never, really lived anywhere else besides like the North. And I said yes when they were like, do you want to come down and join forces and scale this company? And that was 3 years ago. So that was a big learning curve because I thought I was a whiskey expert, but I don't think I really was now now I'm like really in it.
How about it?
A big difference. Yeah, there was
something new to learn.
Huh?
I said there's always something new to learn in this biz.
Always. So exactly, Liz. So that's really the story. I came down here and I just thought there was something magical and special. They had collected some beautiful whiskeys. So we have some sourced whiskeys. We still have a lot of those, and we're distilling. So we built kind of based on all my book, my travel, my consulting with craft brands, like really taking all of that learning and put it into strategy for our team at Milam & Greene. And that's kind of what we're doing based on, and a lot of it has to do with Marlene's experience, of course, being at Beam, but also my experience too, just for, watching and writing. Because if you're a writer, like Lou knows, like you're really studying and looking, it's like, it kind of prepares you to do this from a whiskey making standpoint. Now, there's a lot of things that did not prepare me for this that I've now learned over time. Yeah. So that's
we wanted to get back into that. We talked about that a little bit before the show started in our green room. About essentially about being a leader, like running a company, and how so much different that is from essentially running yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like you found it kind of inspiring.
It was inspiring, and it was a different mindset and challenging because it's not about you. It just isn't. It's about the people that are helping bring your vision to life. And it's about inspiring them. Being a CEO, what I've learned now, it's like been almost 3 years, the 2 years officially, but 3 years like trying to lead it. It's been a lot of learning. I had to do a lot of learning myself, and what does it take and what does it mean? And I think a lot of it is about building. If you want to scale a company, you have to have a great team, and to have a great team, you have to, figure out ways to make them feel valued, and I'm not a heavy-handed kind of leader. I don't think I like to encourage them. I have faith in them. believe in my staff. They're tremendous, you know, and it's just always a learning for me about that. So I do a lot of reading on that and what makes a good leader. You know, you have to have compassion. I don't really believe in like, do this, whatever. I think compassion is a lot of it. And also, really a big secret. There's two secrets, I think, of success for building something is one is that it can't just be like sales or just like, oh, I'm going to sell whiskey. There has to be value or intent behind it. Like, why are you doing this? What makes it important to you? Like, is it, you know, just sending your expense report in is a drag. But if you're doing it because you're, you know, you believe in integrity of work, or your value system says that I need to do this on time because I want to, just because that's the kind of person I am. Like, you have to find that value system behind the activity. And I think that's really important. Like, why whiskey? Whiskey is a great connector. It's not just we're selling whiskey, we sell experiences and people. And that's what got me into it in the first place. The second thing I learned is that your network, not in wherever you work, your network will save you. And building a network in this industry or any industry is a prerequisite for success, because during the pandemic, we were we were a Texas only brand, but in order for us to survive with that tremendous, you know, no on-premise, no bars, no restaurants, if we didn't tap into our network that we had, Marlene and I, outside of Texas, to say, hey, we need some help getting distribution, you know, I don't know what would have happened, you know. So having a really strong network and based on integrity and authenticity is what really, I think, will help any person trying to start a business. If you don't have that and you're trying to start it when you need help, that's really tough. So,
well, Heather, what kind of distribution do you have right now?
We are in 11 brick and mortar states now. So like our actual stores are so like Texas, New Jersey, New York, DC, Florida, Illinois, California, Georgia, Oklahoma. I think it's about 11 there, and then 41 states online. So we are trying, you know, that obviously is another big initiative for us. And again, that has nothing to do with whiskey, but learning what e-commerce is, how to navigate e-commerce, evaluate return on investment for your digital ad campaigns, like all this stuff. As I said, Lou was like, what? I got to learn that too? Yeah, you do.
Well, when you're building a brand now, I mean, I used to think, though, I think things have changed a bit over the past year or so. I always used to believe that it was great to have feet on the ground, but it was the hardest part for a lot of small brands, beginning brands, because that means you've got to hire people, and they have to go out and they have to open up markets, and it costs money not just to pay the person, but for travel, hotels, buybacks, events, blah, blah, blah. I mean, have you had that problem yet, or has it not been a problem? Are you guys really well funded?
Yeah, well, you are. I mean, yes, very feet on the ground is very expensive. And it's like, it's not just your feet on the ground. Whiskey or any product, especially in the spirits industry, is going to be a 360 thing. It's like not just your feet on the ground, but also did someone see you because there might be a billboard, or they saw digital advertising, or their friend said something, or the distributor sells it well, or is behind you. There's just so, it's like not just, it's like that, and then it's like this full suite. So sometimes we discuss like, oh, we did really well in this place, what happened? It's like it's never usually just one thing. It's got to be, people need to be seeing it in a couple different places, and that is really challenging. This arena is extremely expensive to play in. Extremely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and it is hard. Nobody that I know has just endless budget. So you're always looking at where to spend that money, and it's hard, especially when it comes to digital advertising. I still think, I don't know if anyone's listened to, I think it might've been Malcolm Gladwell or one of his shows, or Steve DeBruvner, Freakonomics. One of those two did a 2-part series on digital advertising. Like, how to evaluate it? There's just all these things every day that you're just thinking about. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, it's expensive, and there's a lot of pieces.
And then what about your whiskey? What was your whole thought process behind your whiskey?
Thought you'd never
want to make?
I thought you would never ask. Very excited. So, yeah, so as I said, there was, I had a lot of experience working in the industry before I got to Milam & Greene. So our team and I, we kind of okay, what do we have? What is our pot still capable of doing? What does it taste like right now? What do we have in storage? What are our opportunities? And then developing what our whiskey would be into the, obviously 5-10 years into the future. Because, obviously you need to just plan out quite a bit because whiskey requires aging. So how do we do that? Well, we decided we would do something a little different than any craft distiller here in Texas, which is like, we know that at the end of the day, all of us knew, that, and part of this came from my working at the Flatiron Room, that consumers, they love the idea of craft. They love the idea of small business. They want to support it. And then over and over, they would taste some craft brands and I would see it and they would be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. Or I taste like corn or grain. It was like a little rough around the edges. And they'd come back again the next week. And then they'd still go back to Maker's Mark, Four Roses, a Kentucky whiskey. That just happened over and over. So there was this gap between consumers who really want that experience. And yet the taste didn't level up to what they did. So we knew that whatever we put into this bottle, it didn't matter about me. That's why I say it's like not about you. It was like, what is the consumer? And it was like getting into that mind frame. Like, yeah, of course, we want to do 100% grain to glass, like everything right away. But it's like, does that yield the best whiskey? And the answer is you don't know yet when you have a new distillery because you don't know what the terroir is going to do. You don't know what the warehouse is going to do. We know more because we have such an amazing master distiller. So we decided let's open this up and use all of the tools we have to create great whiskey. So it's not just 100% grain to glass, which we do. We're also bringing MGP product in and we're seeing how we can take those ryes and do something really interesting with them using Texas terroir. That's what our port finished rye is. We blend, we do hybrid. So our whiskeys with other whiskeys. We do a single barrel program where it's I like to call it independent bottling, but of course we know here we call it sourcing. So finding all the great, we have a line where we find great barrels. We have a blending, batching. So we kind of do it all under one roof. And then one other thing we do differently as well is we distill in Blanco. And Marlene goes to Kentucky a couple times a year and she distills with a lot of her old team members at Beam who are working at Bardstown. And then we're open about it all. So the idea is putting that consumer who were whiskey drinkers, first of all, obviously, but it's like, what do they want? And trying to backfill how we can just create great whiskeys using the totality of the American whiskey experience, producing experience too. So we like having two stills, a pot still, like in Japan, those whiskeys have pot stills and column stills. It's to me, like going into a warehouse, like a giant spice box, and what do we want to do? Casks, this state, this size, this barrel entry fill, this proof, it's just fun.
Canada too. I mean, that's in terms of blended whiskey, right?
Yeah.
Just column and pot, you have that flexibility to kind of master a blend. And I guess just a follow-up question with your whiskey strategy, kind of with that everything you just mentioned. Do you have plans to eventually move everything in-house, or will you continue to kind of use those other levers of flavor?
It's a great, people ask us that a lot. And I think if you continue, I just don't know why we would close this down to say this is all we're only ever going to do once we get our pot still. Yeah. I mean, I think if you want to be, the history has it that great whiskey companies kind of pull all these different levers. And I would imagine we continue to do it, but who knows, it's 4 or 5 years down the road. But right now we don't have plans to just use a pot still. That's why I really like having a column still to use. I think that's going to be really great. And I think that it's really nice to have aging happen in two different states that have we know what the terroir pretty much is going to do in Kentucky and Tennessee. The wild card is Texas. So for us, it's like, okay, we are going to have something really beautiful to blend in with maybe what happens with our Texan spirit, because it does taste different here. Like if you take what Marlene did, and she knows how to make a great Kentucky whiskey, and then she applies that here, it tastes different. It just tastes different. It's really interesting. It tastes different in Texas. You can use the same 53-gallon barrel, the same, like
That's the tagline.
parameters of making bourbon. We put it in.
It's different in Texas. That's your new tagline. It tastes different in Texas. Like
it does.
It's different.
So you think this? I mean, I've heard other distillers talking about a Texas style of whiskey. Is that going to become a thing? Is it a possible thing? Is it a thing you want to have it? No? Well,
I don't think so, because
okay.
Yeah, I'm different in that, and they love that because they want that. But Texas,
Right.
How many Scotlands can fit in? Like 3 Scotlands can fit. I mean, it's crazy to say there's one Texan style, because
So you're already assimilated talking like that.
I mean, there's going to be a variety, because like what the weather in where Iron Root is, which is north of Dallas, is very different than Whitmire's in Houston. Like Houston's hot and steamy, and tremendous humidity is going to affect how evaporation happens in your flavor. So like, in hill country where we are, it's like the weather's like insane. It's like really, really cold. And then it's like triple digit temperatures for like 3 months and super dry. So it's like wet and cold and then super dry. So, it's hard to say what a Texan style would be, because in Blanco, there's 3 of us, 3 distilleries there now. And they're all we're all pretty different. I would say though, it's really interesting. The San Francisco Wine and Spirits competition just kind of came out with a vote. Texas killed it. I mean, Texas, I think it is now giving Kentucky and Tennessee a run for its money, because like these are coming in to their own. They're really great. They've been doing it now for a while. There's learnings. We all talk to each other. I mean, Balcones, like you look at Jim there, and I think Texas is, and it makes sense. Like it feels bourbony in Texas. And don't forget, Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law in 1964.
Ah.
Where was he from?
Texas, I believe.
Hard to forget.
So
him and his little nut cutting trousers. Hey, what is your evaporation rate down there in your part of town?
8%.
It's a little personal, isn't it?
Yeah.
What? About his
Really? You
trousers?
want to get
Hear the tape? It's true. It's out there.
It's 8%. It's high.
Wow.
Wow,
Yeah.
8%.
And then it kind of levels up.
yeah.
How does that vary? Do you know? Have you talked to others in other parts of the state? Because that's always fascinated me as far as time, especially.
That's a good question. In fact, right before the pandemic, I had secured a few places to kind of take our barrels and distribute them around Texas to get a little bit closer. So Lou, if you want to run that experiment with me, I need a partner and we can evaluate it over time. And then a couple of people asked to take our Blanco Spirit, and then we can really kind of look what that evaporation does over time. So we're starting to see, I love that. I think that we talk a lot of like, oh, Texan whiskey, but let's actually do some experiments, and that's something.
On a barge, I'm really curious.
What? Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you said exactly, the question is, it's like, great, you mentioned, let me taste it against the one that wasn't. So
right.
Holy crap, other than that, it's a marketing gimmick, and I think that's what I am wary of. It's not just like Texan whiskey as a marketing gimmick. I think it will behoove the whole group of us down here to really get at what is that difference. I suspect that Texas whiskeys, the ones that are going to do well, are the ones that understand their unique terroir and can really manipulate and work that into their whiskey. One thing I will say, I do think Texas is going to offer whiskey drinkers, and I think it was rough going for a while, but I think that, as non-age statement whiskeys in Kentucky and Tennessee keep proliferating, it's harder and harder to get. It's an exciting place to move to, like for a whiskey drinker.
So something I wanted to kind of follow up, because you touched on it a little bit, and I know we talked about the consumer experience, right, and consumer preference. And I think this probably ties along to kind of what you just said. And, the question is, will consumers' preference shift over the next, 5, 10 years, especially as you say, the craft industry, we're talking more with one another, keeping others more accountable, and sort of the industry holistically is sort of elevating. Do you think by that sort of elevation that's going to shift, consumer preference as well?
You mean their kind of knowledge with
the quality?
Quality, right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that not all, but many craft distillers are coming into their own. They're understanding what is happening in their warehouse in a way they didn't early on. Or they can take learnings from what happened to other distilleries and apply that to their own, so that, those early innovators and pioneers, like learning from their mistakes, it was tough. So yeah, I think that is something, I think that consumers are going to continue. Lou would be another good person to ask. Do you think people are going to continue drinking craft?
Different answer than 3 years ago, because I just said no. It's gotten that much better.
Really?
Yeah.
There's more reason to. It's exactly what you said. There's more reason to drink craft now than just I'm supporting a local business. I'm interested in this unique idea. Now it's actually good in the glass. And I've said it before. It wasn't. I don't have. No.
Lou, I think you also get a number of. You're always having a different wave of new whiskey drinkers trying something, and if they're trying something that, say, if you started drinking from a craft distillery when it first opened, you were getting not their best. They were going to bottle whatever they had, and they were going to learn from experience. But even some of the brands that are pretty established now, when they first started, I used to give them in, and it was like
very much so.
Can of raised starch, but now it's really improved. Plus, you don't have. We've talked about this before. There's not as much brand loyalty so much, in that you have people who have these enormous whiskey selections, and they want everything. Well, they love some stuff more than others. Yeah, but you find something, all of a sudden, all you need is that one drink at a bar. You go, wow, that was pretty good. I'm going to have that again.
Do you guys think that the era of the blockbuster whiskey brand is over, and that forever it's going to be cleaved into kind of tribes? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I think there'll always be hype. I mean, you still have Peppy Van Winkle still.
Well, that's when you say blockbuster. Do you mean a brand like Jim Beam, Johnny Walker? Okay,
Jim Beam. Bullet, even Bullet.
So something that dominates like 50% of the market.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that boils down to marketing and the money you got behind it. I think if people are smart, if a company is smart, they can grow another brand into being another Jim Beam or look at Bullet. I mean, Bullet was
Bullet was nothing.
Source whiskey for the longest time, and now they have their distillery. Certain somebody we know over here, she knows all the secrets and where bodies are buried. Can't tell you though.
That had to kill you.
I don't see why not. Why wouldn't they?
Or they'd kill you.
Yeah. You got to be in hiding like me, Liz.
That's actually Marty Witness Protection Program. That's what that.
That's my no last name. I'm changing my last name.
But anyway,
No, I think, I mean, I always, because it's what I do, I always look at beer as well. And, I mean, I see Budweiser off by 50% from what it was 20 years ago. So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the beer market's shattered. The former blockbuster brands, as you said, I mean, they're not what they used to be. I can't think of any large brand from the 80s that is still like where it was or gaining. I mean, I can't even think of any that are holding steady anymore.
But not to labor the point, I mean, it wasn't beer. I mean, a lot of those big brands, they were kind of weak in flavor, and then you had these little guys come along and create some really beautiful, flavorful beers that
Sure.
them. And now, too, also some of that whiskey, I don't think it suffers to some degree. But if you go into a bar, most bars, they don't have the same set
I volunteer.
They don't have the same set of tap handles anymore. They have rotating, right? And
sure.
The worst thing that can happen to a bottle of whiskey is that if you put it in the wrong kind of bottle, you can turn it sideways. It'll be sideways on a back bar. But if it'll still be on the back bar, and it could still be on a menu.
Yeah.
I think the other consideration, right, is M&As. I mean, I think that changes the landscape.
Yeah.
Wait, is what? What's an M&A?
Merger and acquisition.
Oh, I was thinking of 3 letters. Sorry. Oh, I've been writing about RTDs and FLTs and
the jargon is
it's crazy.
Yeah, there are a lot of those. So
yeah,
it's just interesting. Where Liz, it's a great question. Like, where is craft going? And I think happily, what I do believe now, bourbon, American whiskey is here to stay. I don't, people are like, is it a phase like vodka is, or, like how vodka has this thing and, imploded and all that. I don't really think that's the case with whiskey. And the reason why I think that is because it's kind of like this discovery of an American provenance, like spirit provenance. And it's kind of like France is to wine or California is to Napa Valley. There's a lot of pride in it. And I think that because it's made here, I don't think it's just a trend that's going to pass through. I think it'll just evolve, but it seems like it's not going anywhere, and it doesn't look like the numbers are also tend to be trending down, And
I think to that point, I mean, world whiskey categories, right? I mean, if you look at it's not just US, there's totally new, categories like Mexican whiskey, like classic, that's a prime example. Of course, we're going to be talking to some folks here in a few weeks from Sweden. So, I mean, I think that's also, I think, a really exciting thing for the consumer, that it's not just bourbon, it is all these other, shades and experiences.
And I've again, going back to beer, I remember hearing a lot of people saying when we hit 1,500 breweries that it's going to be disastrous because consumers will be faced with too much choice and it will wreck the market. And of course, now we're at 8,000, and that's just in the United States. So, I mean, are we over 2,000 distilleries now? I think we have to be.
Well, I know it's close to 1,800 brands.
Okay.
I haven't done a recent count in North America of the actual number of distillers, because some of them are counting some of the numbers like that you have for Distiller Magazine. I think they count like some of the garage distillers and things like that. But it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot. I mean, I remember Bill Owens saying he thought it would get to about 300. So obviously we blew back that a while ago. So
Bill wasn't thinking very large.
I mean, obviously, I just banked my entire career on that the consumer is going to continue wanting a craft brand, right? So I remain very, business is great for us. It's doing well. People want it, and we're growing like mad. So from my experience, it seems to me that they are really excited about finding brands as Lou or one of you had said, like that actually they feel like they can return to and drink because it's good and it's also a small business. So very excited about that. And one of them already said it. Marty said it. So
I'm very biased.
So Ryan, just calling out a comment here, Ryan Masio says, enjoying the show. Thank you. And sipping on Milam and Green, port finished dry. So he says, well done.
Thank you. Yeah. Too much.
I'll kill it.
Zavato was here. Hey, Amy. Amy Zavato.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, Amy.
But we're banking. I'm banking a career on, that whiskey consumer is going to be, as Liz, you said, more educated. They're going to seek us out to support not only a small brand, but one that I think knows what they're doing to create really nice product. And it is a challenge. You got to, as a craft distiller, also I've worked with large brands, that people early on were talking about consistency too. So you've got to because you are dealing with a lot. It's like you're cooking over an open fire versus just having something completely automated in a microwave or something. It's just or automated. It's these small pot stills and the pipes that are kind of attached to them, and the smaller fermentation tanks, all this stuff. There's just so many little delicate things that can change that balance that just so much trickier with a craft distillery, but it's also the challenge and the fun, especially if you like blending and batching.
Yeah. Can we talk more about that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did I step on you?
Go ahead, Marty.
No, go ahead, little fella.
The number of people, I had a bit in the latest book about how long it takes to make a blend, because apparently some people had the idea you do it in an afternoon. You just sit down with some samples and start throwing them together, and hey, there's our next one. Yeah, right. So could you talk about that?
Mm-hmm, sure. So
help me. If you put one together in an afternoon, I'll come down there and smack you. I don't want to hear that. Kidding. I'm kidding.
I haven't done one in one. We haven't. It's not it just depends on the whiskey, really. You could totally do one in one afternoon. All of a sudden, you're just wow, this is really cool, and you could conceivably, if you're just really lucky and you have barrels that you love each one, and each one tastes well, and they all bring a little different, unique personality to the table. You could be totally lucky, and
you'd probably be nuts to throw it out, right?
Huh?
You'd be nuts to throw it out just because it was the first one.
Yeah. So, in fact, our grain to glass distillers edition was a really easy batching of, it's batching and technically what a blend is, but batching our first cast together. But it was was really great because we put all these barrels down that we wanted to do a small release, 7 to 9 barrels. They all were really, we only eliminated 2, and that needed either more aging or we're better off for something else. But we were really lucky, and there wasn't a huge variance of flavor, and we could, put them together, and they blended really nicely together. So that was one of our distillery pot still grain to glass that's available, and you can get that in Texas or Illinois through Vinnie's as well. And then there's other things that are a little more challenging. So our triple cask is, or I should say, the one I just did, which is Castle. I'll use that as a good example, Castle Hill series. So we first put those barrels out in the warehouse, and I was wow, I think you can't do it in the afternoon loaded, what you're saying, because your personal palate can change as well, depending on the day. But we put those out, and I was I was a little afraid for those casks. I thought they nosed really sweet, but they tasted kind of dry. And so then I bottled them up, and then I took them to my house and then did it again. And then Marlene did it where she was, and then she vatted a few of them together, and I had some of what I thought would be good, just like back and forth. And then we sat and just kind of went through and decided like, well, wait a minute, if it noses really sweet but tastes dry, that's interesting, right? So like for me, I like Scotch. So that ended up being like there's also intent too. Like it's kind of like a happy mistake, or sometimes you're blending things and you're like, well, I didn't intend to do that, but actually that's kind of interesting. So there's just lots of stuff and it's pretty subjective. Subjective. And then there's the proofing part of it. We proof blind. And interestingly enough, our port finish dry and our triple cast both ended up at the same proof. So, we proof blind, and that's really interesting experience as well. And it's trying to see where that whiskey tastes best. And we do it. I don't like to be the only person. I don't like to be the only person doing every single thing for a blend or a batch. I really believe in a group of us. And then I forgot about this. We did take our port finish dry, like we were finishing that in like different barrels. And I did bring it to New York, and just tasted friends and family and like Wondrich and just get their opinion, so you got to see. No, so it wasn't an afternoon. It wasn't just an afternoon.
See, now you got me curious. The proofing blind, what gradations were you? Like 0.5%, 1%, 5%?
Yeah, usually like 1%. We usually go down to 1 point. So if it's 94, 93, 92, 91, 90.
Yeah, okay. Just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. So starting up at the top and then going down maybe just 10 or so. We don't really go, none of our products, are really low proof. And I think that's partly because we're all whiskey drinkers. So we want, if you're going to add ice to our whiskeys, we still want it to be robust, not dip below that 40%, although some people really like that. So, I like a strong
whiskey. I'll tell you, not a lot of love for 80 proof whiskeys on Facebook groups. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You can't.
Honest to God, I said something nice about Four Roses Yellow Label. I thought they were going to kill my kids. It was nuts.
Yeah. Well,
they need to do more blind stuff because they let what the label and what's being said and their ideas color their actual experience.
Honest to God, that's my answer to almost every time somebody says that whiskey's shit. I'm like, let me run that by you blind. We'll see where you sit.
Well, they're the proof, especially with American whiskey. I always think with American whiskey, and you saw this a lot with bartenders too. The higher the proof, the better it was. And it was almost along the lines of Scotch, where everyone thought, "Oh, the older it is, the better it is." And it's like
that's a good point.
Now, come here. It'll only just give you a little right in between the eyes.
My mother used to do that.
right between the eyes. Wow.
Oh, not between the eyes. It'd be
okay. So I wanted to ask you about the blending. How do you stop yourself? I always thought if I was blending and I had a lot of whiskey, I'd end up blending. Remember that Chivas? I don't think it's still out there. The Century. That was.
Marty, that is a really good question because sometimes I'll just be like, I'll go on and discuss it. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, no one's going to like this much. Like, that's fine. Like, you do, because you'll just go on forever. Like, and it's
like rewrite, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
You're just like, and I have it. Part of it is a confidence thing. Like I just eventually was like, there's that imposter syndrome people have, and it's like, wait a minute. I've been in this industry. I have tasted thousands and thousands of whiskeys. I know intuitive. I don't have to discuss this for 8 hours. I should by now have the privilege to have an instinctual ability to say it's good or not good and trust.
And have that. That's it. Yeah.
And trust
and
it.
Run with it. Yeah.
Doubt myself or, lack confidence. Like, am I really tasting this or that? I'm like, wait a minute, Heather, you've have the confidence. You've put the dues in 20 years almost. Like, what's good. it's good. Like, but you do start like, oh, shouldn't I sweeten it like this and that? And I'm like, the average consumer, Marty, it's a great question, because you do have to know when to just be like, and it's the same losing writing. Like it's, you never want to think it's good enough, but you just have to be like, I think it is good enough. Good
You
enough.
should have seen Lou's original copy of Tasting Whiskey. It was like a phone book. It was enormous. He just went on and on. I had to edit it for him. That's why he thanked me.
Oh yeah, it's and then actually,
Yeah, I sent him the manuscript and a machete.
Did you?
I just took every other page out. I didn't even edit it. I just took every other page out. It worked.
But it's another good question, because that was another lesson as learning how to be a CEO of a small business is that also at the end of the day, I feel like there's a stack, this giant of opportunities I didn't pursue or things I couldn't get to. And there's just has to be a comfort level with I'm doing the best I can, or, like you did as much as you can. Now take a break and then hit it again tomorrow, and stopping at knowing when to stop at good points in your day. I know from writing, I don't remember one of the great writers, maybe it was, I might have been Hemingway or something. Stop while you're ahead. Like, don't keep writing until you're frustrated. And then the next day you start frustrated, stop when you're good. And then you're excited about, that's something I learned writing, but yeah, knowing when to just stop. No one's I think at the end of the day, no one's gonna really care as much as I do, like about any particular little thing. So I have to be like, okay, I think my consumer will like this.
Yeah, see, that's another question. Are you making whiskey for you, or are you making whiskey for a consumer? Or are you making, that gets into the, excuse me, I was about to say the George Bush, the vision thing. What is the vision for the blending there?
I make it for whiskey. I really try to keep that whiskey drinker in mind. We are not making whiskey for like, to put in a punch, like, in a $20 price range. Our whiskeys sit above $40 all the way up to, about 45 all the way to maybe 150, depending on what the retailer, how they price them. But we're not really making whiskey for just to put in punches or to not think about. I'm not saying you have to analyze our whiskey, but it is for a whiskey drinker. So I want to make sure that it doesn't have off notes, or if it doesn't taste, if it tastes unusual, that it's a good unusual, or, so yeah, the consumer is a big part of it, but I'm also a consumer. It's not an ad somewhere.
True.
But I'm also a pretty harsh whiskey critic myself, and nothing. And Marlene is super, and our whole team, Marsha, all of them, like we
tough.
Want to make good whiskey.
You have to be, yeah.
You have to be. It has to.
Tough as a Texas cactus. That's what you can call it.
Huh?
What?
Tough as a Texas cactus. You can just throw that in there.
I like. Did you just make that up?
He makes shit up all the time. All the time.
Expression, but I will tell you,
this show is actually a marketing exercise. That's what it is. It's just Marty flexing.
Tough as a cactus. So moving from the city down here, my dog, poor dog, that's who's had the most issues, because
ouch.
He did lift his leg to pee against a cactus.
Oh, no.
You would agree with you, Marty.
I did that too once, and that was horrible.
Poor little Franklin trotted off.
That's what I said.
All the little.
Oh, damn.
Haven't seen my name.
Right. Yeah. Anyways,
wow,
yeah.
really?
So much more than I needed.
Huh? Yeah.
Well, you tend to fall over. I've noticed that our dog tends to lean into it. So, yeah. Yep.
And he's pokey in the heat. Yeah. There's grass.
Oh, yeah.
In our line is like birds. I mean, yeah, it's been rough going. I think if the dog could talk, he might have. I love being here. It's amazing. I think if the dog could talk, he would just be like, "This is terrible, terrible."
How come you didn't?
Do I recall you did get a pickup truck? Is that right?
We have a Milam and Green. Yeah, we do. We have a Milam and Green pickup truck. Yep.
Nice.
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 Well, we all use it as well, but yeah, it's pretty great. It's very cool. Well, it needs a lot of upkeep, but yeah. I ended up also getting I had to get 2 cars moving down here. Yeah, all sorts of things happened. All sorts of things happened when I moved here. Houses, I have a washer dryer for the first time in
Oh my God.
I live.
Wow. In the house.
For
Yeah.
the first time? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have like washer. I mean, in New York City or even Jersey City, you don't have a washer dryer inside. Well, some people do inside your apartment. You could go downstairs.
Got one.
Lizard then.
Some people do. Yeah.
Yeah, we just moved my kids into my son and his girlfriend into a new apartment. They got a washer and dryer, and they're like, "Look, it's a washer and dryer." I'm like, yeah. Okay. Right.
And garage. Yeah, that's the thing.
Ooh.
Well, Nicole Weston.
Chicago, we just go down to the banks
Huh?
of Lake Michigan. In Chicago, we just go down to the banks of Lake
Beat
Michigan.
them on a rock.
Get
Chicago
your
River.
little board out.
Bank it
I
with
said- I was gonna say,
photo salmon.
The what?
That's a Chicago thing.
Been to Lake Michigan?
You beat your laundry with a coho salmon. The scales, take all the dirt off.
Sorry, Heather. I would swear you were trying to say something. Please, God, have been trying to say something.
It wasn't that. I mean, I was just going to say it was because Nicole Austin from George Trickle used to live in New York, and when I left and came here, and she is now in Tennessee. I send pictures of my laundry room to her, and she'd be like, "Yeah, I get it." You can ask her what she's done, right? We do. We were like, "Oh, it's amazing." Also, like parking spots, like life got easy for everything, but for Franklin, he did not.
For free. And so,
Poor Franklin.
Heather, go ahead. Go ahead, Lizard.
We actually had a question from the audience, so I thought we could we could dive into that.
Novel idea.
It better be better than mine.
Okay. Question from Ryan as well. So, Heather, this leadership commentary is spot on. Have you ever thought of writing a leadership book combining your business experience, leadership philosophy, and using whiskey to bridge the two? And I know you mentioned Malcolm Gladwell earlier on in the conversation. I just finished one of his books as well, so big fan of his as well. But back to you. Have you contemplated a book yourself?
I have. I think about it. I mean, I don't have lots of time right now, but I have a friend who's an amazing author on Facebook. And I said, she's amazing. She does really, really well. Her name's Lori Gwen Shapiro. Everyone should follow her on Facebook. She's great. And she wrote, she's now,
Yeah.
Do you know her? Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was texting, like, I'm ready to, she's really good at like book proposal. I said, I want to do one. She's like, have you made millions and millions of dollars for your company yet? I'm like, not yet. And she's like, then you can't.
Because no one will give a shit. Is that it?
No. I was like,
Well, there you are.
all right, I gotta wait.
Fair point.
I was like, yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. So I was like,
To the point.
well,
Yeah.
you can't now, not yet. Next year.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I mean, there are, like our companies, how successful do we need to be before I can write that book? I think that we're getting there. We are like one of the fastest growing brands in America. And I do a lot of the stuff that I've learned, I think is something that's valuable and teachable for a lot of small businesses. Absolutely. And it's something I would love to do. I would love to. Yeah. So
Hey, Heather, going back to your the whole blending idea and just knowing what you're looking for and how good what you've made is. One of the things we've discussed before are distilleries that end up being a little too cloistered, and the only thing they taste is their own spirit. And therefore, it's your baby, right? You taste it and you go, oh, this is the best ever. Nobody's ever made anything like this before. Oh my God, so good. And so I always tell brands, whenever they actually ask for my opinion, go out, which is rare. Have you gone out and tasted the competition? Obviously, you've had loads of whiskey in the past, but You look around, you travel around to the distilleries, see what they're doing, taste what they're doing, and just kind of help,
Mhm.
no, for no other reason, but to help you kind of keep a balance of, okay, all right, I see that. I liked what they were doing. It tasted good. I didn't like what they were doing,
Mhm.
so that's something to avoid. I mean, do you do that much?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's kind of what I was saying before. Like, I feel like it's more like Milam Green is almost like all those years of tasting brought into this, as well as continuing to evaluate and taste against great whiskeys. And it is definitely, it's really, it's empowering, but also it's like trying to be a musician as when I was a musician, and like, you're gonna like listen to the Beatles and be like, oh, I just want to go to bed now, like it's like, I'm not gonna, like, or like you're trying to write a book and then you read somebody else. Like, you're always comparing yourself to like the best or the greatest brands. And it's like, how do you do that and create stuff where you are and like the best you can create at that moment in time, given what you have, and be proud of that, and benchmark yourself against. I mean, for me, I try to taste the great whiskeys. And it's really interesting because down here in Texas, they want to compare us to other Texas whiskeys, or even they're like, oh, is that your competition? It's like, no, why would that be my competition? My competition is the greatest whiskeys that in the world. That's who I want to taste against. Like, how close am I to that? How close are we to that? Are we getting towards that? Are we moving away from that? Like, to me, that's the comparison, not just benchmarking against people, other craft distillers, but unless they're making like really phenomenal whiskey, that's who I compare it to. I try to go to the best, not even anything else, but that, like, you have to, if you want to make great whiskey and be a great brand.
Yeah, see, I just stopped reading Dave Broom. That's how I dealt with it. I just don't look at it.
Forget it. I can't do what he does. Forget it. He's such a I know. He's such a good writer.
Wow.
Well, how about this, Heather? Since you had Scotch had such a big influence on you, how much does Scotch come into play? I mean, even though you're making American whiskey, do you ever think? I like some of the various smoked whiskeys that are out there. American whiskeys, whether it's
smoked American, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's just one aspect, but even the American single malts, basing an American single malt more off of Scotch than anything you've seen here. I don't know. I'm just wondering what kind of influence it's had on you.
Well, the blending and batching is a huge influence. So not necessarily such obvious, like more like smoking or the end flavor, but how they put together whiskeys in the background, how they nose and taste, setting up their vials and or little bottles in their labs, and like looking at not being afraid of blending and batching, not being afraid of sourcing. Look at John Glaser from Compass Box, like, they elevated that to an art form, looking at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, Caden Hens, Gordon MacPhail, Signatory. I mean, these are all great companies that, or where Sam Simmons is, that great boutique whiskey company. This is about how you have a great team that, if they're not also distill, we also distill, but using these other methods to create a great liquid in a bottle, and honoring that in and of itself as a skilled craft. And that's how I think Scotland influenced me to say, when we came to Texas, like, yeah, we are going to blend and batch. Yep, I will source. Or what Liz asked, like, well, we always will, because I believe that the pinnacle of success isn't just necessarily just digging a hole and making it myself. It's all of it to make the greatest whiskey possible. All the stuff we can do. That's how Scotch influenced me.
Go ahead. Sorry, the blending part of making your whiskeys, is that something you have to educate the consumer on, or do you just kind of? Yeah.
A lot. And it's, it's slowly coming. I think people are starting to understand that you don't just, if you're going to do it well or source well, it's not just picking up the phone and slapping a label on it. There's a lot of, there's like, okay, like people will ask, it's like, well, okay, who are you going to source the barrel from? At what age? Does it require longer aging? And if it does, where are you going to do that? How are you going to create a unique personality that represents you around something you bring in house? Like how, if you want to partner with a great person who does the distilling for you, like, do they want to sell to you? Believe it or not, they don't want to sell to anybody, because they don't want to just flip it to investors. They do want it to go to the right people. Some, believe it or not, some Kentucky people who are selling brokering casks, like they want to know that. Are you overpaying? Like there's actually a lot of other things that go into it, So I would say for that aspect, for the sourcing, yes, the consumer still is often a long way to go, defining what it means to be a unique whiskey brand. Like, is it just the distilling? Is it just like grain to glass? Is it employees? Is it sense of place? Is it the people? Like it's not just so myopic. And then from the blending, I think when I did a class on blending at San Antonio Cocktail Conference last year, and I counted that there are 38, I think it was up to 38 different definitions of blend, depending on where you come from. So there is no one blend.
Yeah.
Blended Scotch whiskey, blended grain whiskey, American blended whiskey, and then our triple cast is something called a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys, Japanese blends, Canadian blends. I mean, you've Irish blends. There is no one definition of blend, so in a lot of ways, it almost becomes meaningless. If you're not a single barrel, you're kind of blending something. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it is. But that's really hard to communicate because there's too many. There's a lot of you've seen it. Misinformation. Some of these Facebook blogs, I just am like, oh God. Oh, we've commented, Lou. We're like, we did
away at it, man.
We did our best. Yeah. Sometimes I laugh. And they'll go and they'll talk like, I know, like this and try to figure stuff out. And I think I just recently posted, I'm like, you guys, there's books out there and this has already been discussed for 10 years. Like it's the answers are up there. Like, why are you still talking? It's so weird.
Yeah.
They kind of want to. Sorry, Liz, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in some scenarios, I think you guys hit it on the head too. There's a negative connotation almost to it, depending on,
Definitely.
again, back to, what was the education that consumer got. So I think I think there is quite a bit of a gap there.
I used to love.
It's just an opportunity to beat heads together.
When people were big single malt Scotch fans, and you just lay down the numbers and say, dudes, it was 95% of all Scotch sold is blends, and somehow they would reinterpret that going, oh, well, I'm part of that 5% of really smart guys. I go, oh yeah, that's how that works. Yeah,
it's self-evident.
Yeah, yes. The words were necessary, mister.
Yeah, it's all very confusing. It's like if it doesn't say single barrel, that whiskey's they call it batched if it's one distillery, blended if it comes from more than one distillery. But at some point,
yeah.
No,
I like how the
that's another one too. Mingled is
Scotch Whisky Association made a very very clear things up a lot when they had not only blended Scotch whiskey, but blended malt Scotch whiskey, which
that helped
so much clearer for folks.
Brilliant.
But what's not clear is single grain Scotch whiskey. They're what's the grain? Like, okay, single changes depending on where you are too.
Right.
Single grain, that's the whiskey you could use more than one type of grain in.
Yeah, right.
Come on.
It's so confusing for the consumer.
My God.
It's so confusing. But at the end of the day, does your whiskey taste good? Can they afford it? I really think there's just that's really important. Does it taste good? Can they afford it?
Right. And, that's where the brand comes in. The brand name is something that a consumer can go to. They go, okay, that's being made somewhere that last time I tasted it was really good. I don't need to understand all these little intricacies because I'm not making the whiskey. It's great to have that information. You've got it, but to worry about it, no. That brand makes good stuff. I'm going to drink it.
Yeah. It's all about that. But we'll see what happens. I mean, Milam and Green is definitely a passion. There's a lot of, no pun intended, heart that goes into our whiskey. We have a really great team, and it's starting to show like that. Because like I said, we are growing tremendously. We're up like 200% almost, or something crazy in the past couple of months over last year.
You'll be writing a book in 3 years, Heather.
Sorry?
You'll be writing that book in 3 years.
Right, exactly. Well, the brand only came out a year and a half ago. So the first is like kind of setting that, and then actually is only launched about a year and a half ago. It's only been in the whole US for probably 4 months. So I think it's doing okay, so we're really excited. Yeah. I think we're really excited. I think people will be pleased when they taste it.
Sweet.
Happy, I hope.
Is it wrap time?
It is.
Yeah.
Heather,
okay.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
It's been a fun hour and some change. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. It was really nice to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you. Glad you're doing well. I'm glad you're doing great.
Thanks. Yeah. Come down.
Yeah.
Come blend with me.
Well, actually,
still scared to travel. I'm getting there. But
before there was this little mishap over the last year. Lewis and I were planning on doing.
Oh yeah, we were planning a Texas trip.
Yeah, road trip.
Yeah,
doing kind of a distillery trail.
I think you guys should. It was really fun.
What
so before we wrap up, just wanted to tell you to come back next week. I see Will has put up the link for our very special guest next week, Johnny Jeffrey. I see Johnny, you joined today, so thanks for joining. We're all really excited for you to join us on next week. So check that out. Head distiller at Bentley Heritage Estate and co-founder of the Good Guy Distillers. So check it out next week.
Also, real quick, a shout out, a little congratulations to one of our former guests, Brendan Mccarron. Formerly of LVMH, is now the head distiller for all of distills malts. So Bunnahabhain.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah, he sounded pretty excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I put in a good word for him. Yeah.
That'll do it. The Duffy bump.
Pushed him right over.
All right.
Well,
we'll see you next week, guys.
Thanks everyone for joining. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thanks again, Heather. Bye, guys.